I want to start with looking at a deceptively simple question, one that sits at the center of our text Critical Theory Today and the course as a whole. Why do people accept lives that make them unhappy? Why do individuals internalize guilt, anxiety, and failure even when those feelings are clearly produced by broader social forces? Two major theoretical traditions offer radically different answers. Psychoanalysis tells us that the problem lies inside the subject, in repression, desire, and the unconscious, while Marxism, on the other hand, tells us that the problem lies outside the subject, in capitalism, ideology, and material conditions. Both theories claim that what we think is natural or normal is actually produced, but they disagree on where that production happens, in the psyche or in the social system. Using critical theory today, alongside our lectures on Freud, Lacan, and Althusser, I'll argue that Marxism ultimately provides the stronger critical framework, even though psychoanalysis is essential for understanding how ideology gets internalized. Psychoanalytic theory begins with the idea that the human subject is internally divided. According to Freud, society requires people to repress their instincts in order to function. Desires related to pleasure, aggression, or sexuality must be controlled so that social life is possible. However, repression is never fully complete, which is why anxiety, guilt, and psychological symptoms appear. In critical theory today, this idea becomes a method for reading literature. Texts are treated as expressions of unconscious conflict, and in moments of silence, repetition, contradiction, or obsession are important because they reveal what cannot be openly expressed. As we discussed in lecture, Jacques Lacan takes Freud's idea further by arguing that who we are is shaped by language. When we learn to speak and follow social rules, which is what Lacan called the symbolic order, we gain an identity that others recognize. At the same time, we lose the ability to fully express what we feel or want because the language can never truly capture everything. One key idea from lecture is that desire is based on lack. We keep wanting new things because nothing ever fully satisfies us. Even when we get what we want, the feeling of satisfaction doesn't necessarily last. This means that a sense of distance or dissatisfaction is built into being a subject. From a psychoanalytic point of view, then, suffering is not caused by one particular system or structure. It's part of the human condition. Psychoanalysis can help us become aware of the suffering and understand it better, but it cannot completely eliminate it. Now, on the other hand, Marxist criticism starts from a very different place. Rather than seeing suffering as something natural or psychological, Marxism argues that the human experience is shaped by material conditions, specifically economic stress. As we learned in lecture, Marx explains society through the relationship between economic base and the superstructure. The base includes labor, production, and the distribution of wealth. The superstructure includes culture, law, politics, education, and the media. This means that ideas, values, and even emotions are shaped by capitalism. Feelings such as insecurity, guilt, and fear of failure are not just personal issues. They're produced by systems that depend on exploration and inequality. Marx's concept of alienation explains this clearly. Workers are separated from the products of their labor, from control over their work, from other workers, and from a sense of meaning. Alienation is not psychological by nature, it is economic. So, unlike psychoanalysis, Marxism insists that suffering is historical and structural, not universal or inevitable. Because capitalism is a historical system, it can be challenged and changed. Althusser helps connect psychoanalysis and Marxism. In lecture, we learn that Althusser shifts Marx's focus towards ideology. Ideology is not just false belief. It is the way that society teaches people to understand themselves and their place in the world. Through institutions like schools, families, media, and religion, what Althusser calls ideological state apparatuses, individuals are shaped into subjects who accept the system as normal. This process is called interpellation. When ideology calls us, we recognize ourselves in it and believe that we are acting freely, even though our choices are structured by the system. So at this point, Marxism starts to sound similar to psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis shows how people misunderstand themselves because of unconscious thoughts and fantasies, while Althusser shows how people misunderstand themselves because of ideology. The key difference is that Marxism explains why these misunderstandings happen. It benefits those in power and helps to propagate existing systems to keep them in place. When both applied to literature, these theories produce very different readings. Psychoanalytic criticism focuses on characters' inner conflicts, desires, and familial relationships. Tragedy often appears as the result of personal weakness or psychological failure. Marxist criticism shifts the attention away from the individual and towards the social systems as a whole. Characters fail not because they're flawed, but because they exist within an economic structure that limits their possibilities. As critical theory today emphasizes, ideology works best when suffering appears personal. Literature can either reinforce this idea or expose the system behind it. So, two differing theories. How do you figure out which is more effective? Psychoanalysis is extremely useful for understanding how people internalize guilt and repeat harmful patterns. It explains why individuals blame themselves rather than blame the system. However, psychoanalysis often stops at this interpretation. It explains suffering, but it doesn't really explain how to change the conditions that produce it. Marxism goes further. It shows how psychological experiences are shaped by capitalism and ideology. It explains not only how subjects are formed, but who benefits from that formation. Psychoanalysis asks, why do I feel this way? Whereas Marxism asks, what system made this feeling normal? So in the end, why is this comparison important? Well, psychoanalysis shows us that people are internally divided and often struggle with anxiety and guilt. Marxism shows us that this division is not accidental. It is created and supported by economic and social structures. Together, these theories help us see that the feelings we think are personal are also shaped by society. However, in my opinion, Marxism is more powerful because it connects these feelings to real material conditions and shows that change is possible. In this way, Marxism doesn't ignore psychology. It helps to explain why psychological suffering is so common under capitalism.